want to get to our guest. Andy McCarthy joins us once again, contributing editor at the National Review, host of the McCarthy Report, and a Fox News contributor. Andy, thank you so much for the time today. I guess a day for justice, it seems, in the guilty verdicts of Jose Ibarra, who murdered Laken Riley. I don't know that it would feel like justice to Laken Riley's parents, though, having heard so many of the things that should not have happened leading up to the event where he had access to kill their daughter.
It's just a horrific case, Annie. I mean, I don't have a better way of putting it. I'm sure somebody with a better way of words than I have might be able to come up with something. But your heart just breaks for the family, and there's no good answers for why this guy was in the country. I mean, he should not have been in the country, and they had like a million chances to stop him. And he's one of God knows how many others who've gotten into our country under these policies, which basically eviscerated our border. And it's all well and good to say the people who engineered those policies are now, reaping the whirlwind from it because they've been beaten in an election. But that's not a satisfactory answer to Laken Riley and her family.
No, it's not. Nothing brings her back, and that's all that they would want. In a piece that you wrote that I encourage people to check out a little bit earlier this week in the National Review that you wrote about Laken Riley, you talk about how Ibarra was, in your words, quote, encountered by border agents while illegally crossing into the United States at El Paso in September 2022. What should Americans understand about our systems that are put in place to vet people who are coming here and how they were or were not working?
Well, I think the word encounter is a good place to start. I always quote that because that's their word for it. I refer to it as a euphemism, which is probably the pleasant word for it. The word that I would actually like to describe it as we probably can't say on a family radio show. But they use the word encounter because they don't follow American law, and they don't want you to notice that. So what they're supposed to do when they encounter an illegal alien entering the country is apprehend that person and detain him until the conclusion of removal proceedings. And Congress was crystal clear about this. Even somebody who actually has a colorable legal claim to stay in the United States, even though they've crossed the border illegally, and the number of those people who actually have a legitimate claim on staying here is vanishingly small. I mean, after all, if they had a real legal claim, they would come in legally, right? What Congress said is even if you have a colorable claim, you're still supposed to be detained until you get to the end of the proceeding and the judge has found, yes, you have a colorable claim to stay. And then we can talk about the conditions of your release. But other than that, the vast majority of these people should be detained and rapidly sent out of the country. And instead, what the Biden administration has done is not only not follow the law, not detain people and hold them till the conclusion of their proceedings, they have aided and abetted people in coming to the country to the point that you can actually schedule your illegal entry into the United States with the Biden administration. They have a special app for it, where you basically make an appointment, and you go to one of various hubs in Mexico, and you make the arrangement to get in that way, and they'll process you, and then let you come through our portal. And because they've let you come through it, we're supposed to buy the fiction that you've entered legally, when in fact you're just as illegal as if you had crossed the border without using their app in the first place. And this is just an illegal parole program that Congress, which is the only one that has an authority in our system to design a program like this, has never signed off on it. So this is something that Biden just flat made up, and yet they've been doing it for 4 years.
Well, as you said, the American people have spoken and said we need to do this differently, and that will happen. Just not soon enough for Laken Riley and her family, which is the real tragedy here. I'm glad we were able to talk to you about this because we actually booked you initially to talk about the Donald Trump trial. Trump lawyers today have demanded the Bragg case be immediately dismissed and says that the election supersedes political motivations. In light of waiting on the sentencing for the Laken Riley justice that we are awaiting, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the state of these trials in New York. What do you think about where they are right now and what each side is trying to get done?
Well, I don't think much of Trump's motion legally. It's a political claim, and it's true that Bragg is politically motivated, but the status of President of the United States is not a defense to a criminal charge. And I think President Trump would be on solid ground if he was asking for a postponement of the sentence. And he's on solid ground if he wants to proceed to appeal. Of course, he'd have to be sentenced and formally found guilty before he could do that. And then he could pursue his appellate rights and try to get the case thrown out. And I think there's probably about 10 grounds for throwing it out. But you can't – I just don't think he's going to get anywhere coming in and saying, the voters have spoken, therefore you must dismiss the case. An election is not a reason to throw out a guilty verdict as a matter of law. Now, you could argue, and they do argue, that as a matter of prosecutorial discretion, at this point, it would be in the public interest for Bragg to dismiss the case because we shouldn't want a new president to be under this burden. Bragg obviously knows that there's a lot of problems with the case, and he'll have trouble if he ever has to eventually defend it on appeal. And it does seem kind of ridiculous to freeze the thing in place with the eye toward, in 2029, when President Trump is 83 and a twice-elected American president, hopefully coming off a successful term in office, no prosecutor in his right mind would want to pick up that case and run with it at that point. So there's a lot of good reasons for common sense to prevail and for prosecutorial discretion to be exercised in a way that would dismiss the case. But from Bragg's point of view, and this is, I had some arguments with people on my own side about this because they wanted to pick Democrats as kind of a monolith, and they want to say Democrats have learned the valuable lesson that lawfare blew up on them. It turned out that the voting public didn't like it, and they punished them for it at the ballot box. That may be true of national Democrats. It's not true of Manhattan Democrats. Kamala Harris defeated Trump in Manhattan by 65 points. There was polling in the New York Post, I think 2 days ago, maybe 3 days ago, that shows that Bragg is a prohibitive favorite to win re-election when he's up for re-election next year. He ran the last time promising that if he got elected, he would basically do what he did, which is get Trump. And he brought cases not only against Trump, but Trump's organization, his chief financial officer. That's very popular with progressive Democrats in Manhattan, and they will probably reward Bragg with re-election. So, it's one thing to say that lawfare was bad for Democrats generally. Lawfare has been really good for Alvin Bragg.
I'm thinking as I'm listening to you explain that and jurisdictions and, the constituency is so important here because when you're talking about Manhattan and the people there and how they support what has been taking place, I'm looking over at the District of Columbia presidential votes. Kamala Harris got 92.4% of the votes. Donald Trump got 6.7%. And then I'm thinking to myself, all of these court cases that have been brought against Donald Trump, where are they happening? Why are they happening there? And watching Alvin Bragg and the litigators in New York bring federal cases and shove it into this type of a district. I mean, it seems as though there's a lot of sense behind what they're trying to do. You said earlier, common sense could prevail. Knowing all of the players here, do you anticipate that this part, the Alvin Bragg thing, will continue throughout the course of Donald Trump's presidency, or will common sense eventually find its way to the surface?
No, I think that the Bragg case will continue because he has an advantage that Jack Smith didn't, and that is he got his case to trial, and he won the jury trial, which puts him in a very different spot. You know, Smith has the problem that with the federal prosecutions, they're bound by longstanding Justice Department guidance that says a sitting president can't be indicted or prosecuted. So you couldn't do anything with those criminal cases now. I think the Justice Department sensibly has decided we're going to dismiss these cases rather than hold them in abeyance or suspend them, because they know that starting January 20th, Trump is going to be running the Justice Department. So Trump would dismiss the cases if Biden's people didn't do it now. But that case is in a different posture because it never got to trial. The Atlanta case is in a different posture because it never got to trial. Bragg got to trial and he won, and he doesn't want to give that up. And, you know, from a public interest perspective, you can be very critical of that. You know, I think an American should not want, if it could be avoided, a president under the cloud of an eventual criminal sentencing. And you would hope that the DA would look at this and say, well, you know, a lot of errors in the case. And then the Supreme Court, I mean, he has an out, right? The Supreme Court decided the immunity case a month after the trial.
Yeah.
So he could even not confess error. He could say, look, when the court decided the case, it changed the landscape, so we're going to fold our tent now. He'd still have his jury verdict. No one's ever going to be able to take that away from him, right? He'll always be able to use that politically. But it's not good enough. He wants to keep it. And Trump really doesn't have a legal right until appeal to get it thrown out unless Judge Merchan throws it out. But if Judge Merchan throws it out, that would be the first time in years that he's ruled against Bragg and in favor of Trump. So I'm not holding my breath waiting for that to happen.
Just a real simple question before we let you go. We're speaking with Andy McCarthy right now. Is Donald Trump a convicted felon right now?
No. This is a great question, and it's been confused a lot because of the Democrats' campaign rhetoric. The way it works in the criminal law, if you want to call him a convicted felon, I suppose politically you can do that. But as a matter of law, in the criminal law, there is no judgment of conviction until the defendant is sentenced. So right now what we have are jury findings of guilty, and Trump has made post-trial motions to get those vacated, the guilty verdicts, and the judge hasn't ruled on that yet. So there hasn't been sentencing, and most importantly, the judgment of conviction has not been entered on the court record. So Trump is not a convicted felon. That would not happen until sentencing. And I think that's part of the reason that Trump may be content with having this thing suspended for 4 years, because as long as he hasn't been sentenced, he doesn't enter the White House as a convicted felon.
All right. Well, I'm glad you were able to clear that up for us. We're going to share that little comment far and wide. Andy McCarthy, it's so great to have you on the show with us. We always appreciate you giving us all this legal expertise. It clears a lot of stuff up for us, and we're thankful for it. Thank you so much,
Andy. I appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye. Andy McCarthy is a contributing editor at National Review. His article, which you can check out right now, Laken Riley murder trial underway in Georgia. It's such an easy read. It's like a page and a half printed out. And do you know how many times this guy's been involved in being apprehended or detained by law enforcement? And they just let him go. We brought him here. We moved him around the country. Jose Ibarra was basically our guest. We hosted him. And then he killed a young girl.